Good afternoon, everybody. It is Saturday in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. My name is Adam Bittner, digital sports producer for the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, joined by Christopher Carter, the host of the North Shore Drive, for our weekly mock draft tracker video. Chris, how are you?
I'm doing all right, Adam. How you?
I'm hanging in there. This is a big week for mock draft tracking because it's the last week before the NFL Combine. So we wanted to get Chris in here to get his opinion on some guys whose names we've been seeing a lot on our mock draft tracker, which you can check out on postgazette.com. I'll include the link to this week's down in the description. We've been doing it for about a month, and these 6 names that I'm going to go through with Chris here are the names we hear most often in those mock draft trackers. And so I wanted to get Chris's opinion on what those guys have to prove for him to feel really good about the Steelers picking those guys come April at the NFL Combine this week. So I'm going to start, Chris, with Joey Porter Jr. I think he is the name that I've seen connected to the Steelers the most across all mock drafts on the internet. Obviously, he has the tie to the Steelers through his dad. What do you think he has to show at the Combine to kind of validate all of that pre-draft hype that's been tying him to the Steelers?
Well, one thing that I noticed about Joey Porter Jr. people talk about is when he misses on his initial jam and his effort to press people, it takes him a second to get back into a route. So sometimes that recovery speed it can be lacking at times. I think what people are going to be looking for is not just the 40 speed, but the change of direction, the shuttle time. Does he run the shuttle? How quick is he as far as stopping, turning, changing direction, flipping his hips, especially during the drills. These will be the things that won't necessarily be timed or anything, but how does he do on those instances? I think Joey Porter Jr. has phenomenal potential. He has the build that you want at 6'2". He can go and attack the football, but I think that one thing that he has to show is that when he's facing a really good route runner who he can't just jam at the line of scrimmage, how does he deal with them when they get into their breaks? Is he able to anticipate? Is he able to react? Is he able to flip his hits and turn and get running at full speed? Those will be the things that people will definitely be watching at the Combine. I still think he's one of the best corners in this draft class, but he can definitely improve his stock by showing up big this week.
Another name I wanted to get to, there's 2 other corners, really. It's Christian Gonzalez and Devon Witherspoon. So I'll let you tackle those 2 together. Christian Gonzalez is from Oregon. Devon Witherspoon's from Illinois. They're the other 2, I think, kind of top corners in the draft that a lot of prognosticators have, if they're not picking Joey Porter for the Steelers, especially Gonzalez is a name I've seen very frequently. I think Witherspoon is highly regarded enough that he hasn't really been tied to the Steelers because the expectation is he might not fall to 17. But he might. So why don't you tackle those 2 guys together? What do you want to see from them?
Well, Christian Gonzalez and Devon Witherspoon to me are the 1A, 1B of this draft class. Some people want Witherspoon because he's more aggressive. Some people want Gonzalez because he looks to be more of the pure cover cornerback, whereas Witherspoon is much. He has all the hitting highlights that you could ask for from a corner. From Gonzalez, I think everyone wants to see just how fast is he really, because when he played for Oregon, he looks like he is just a majestic athlete. He moves gracefully. He's fast. He can cover. You didn't see him lose too many foot races, and that's where I think people want to see, okay, just how fast is he now, because sometimes players can be deceiving. Joe Hayden was always a very good corner to a great corner in his time in the NFL. He wasn't a great 40 runner. He ran a 4.5 something, I think. And there's guys that come out like that who don't run the best 40s, but still, because they're able to do the things like I talked about with Joey Porter Jr., mirror wide receivers, be able to switch, turn your hips and get coverage. How does Christian Gonzalez test there? Does he have that top end speed, and can he keep doing those things? One thing, he looked like he was a guy who could cover in any direction. He looked like he was a guy who could line up anywhere on the field. Can he look like that in the Combine with his athleticism? That's certainly something there. Devon Witherspoon, I think it's also kind of just filling out, just making sure that he doesn't have any speed problems there when matching up with the top receivers out there. Because as much as one thing you see with Devon Witherspoon, people love his hitting, but one thing that you can also see with his aggression is that sometimes that was that was as a result of him trying to keep guys in front of him, and he'd get caught with defensive holding. And that's something that I think with Devon Witherspoon, it's something you're willing to accept with all the other things that he brings to the table. But you want to show in this Combine how in shape you are, because a lot of the times the Combine isn't just a place where you're going to your combine isn't the place where you're proving and catching people off guard. The combine is where you're proving that, yeah, what you saw on tape, this is how it does measure up. This wasn't just because I played in the, some really favorable opponents and got some matchups that really worked out for me. This is time to confirm what all the scouts and pros people are saying there. So for Devon Witherspoon, prove people that you are that explosive. One thing that catches out to me, I really hope he gets to do a broad jump and a vertical jump, because broad jump often shows to me just how much explosiveness you can get from your lower body and your core. Vertical jump shows how you can put that all together to get high up in the air and, of course, challenge taller receivers out there. Christian Gonzalez, you want that too, but I think that's more so where Devon Witherspoon can make the bang for his buck and say, like, hey, yeah, I am the best cornerback on the board.
There's 3 offensive tackles that have been tied to the Steelers pretty often as well. The one I see most often and is most often picked in the range where the Steelers will be drafting at number 17 is Broderick Jones, the offensive tackle from Georgia. He is a big guy. What would you like to see from him before we get into the other couple guys?
Broderick Jones is an interesting prospect because I see him, like everyone talks about Paris Johnson Jr. He's one guy in this process, but Broderick Jones looks to potentially to me to be the mauler of the offensive line that the Steelers have wanted for so long, especially at offensive tackle. Marcus Gilbert was such an asset to the Steelers for years because of what he did in the run game. He was a good pass protector too, but in the run game, you knew that if he was going to be, blocking on the edge for Le'Veon Bell, the Steelers were most likely going to have that space. And I think that's where you saw him make his money at Georgia. He was just a physical opponent. When he got going on opponents, it was tough. It was tough to recover. And he has the size that you want at offensive tackle. I think he has, the length at 6'4" at 310. And when he gets a punch on you, when he gets his hands on you, he is so tough to beat. But one thing that I think that we saw in college was that there were sometimes he would get a little over aggressive, and sometimes that would lead to a missed punch, a missed lunge, or missed steps when he's going to get into his run blocking. So those are things that are technique that'll be seen in some drills here and there. But how does he measure up in some of the footwork drills that they do? Again, the broad jump, I want to see how explosive he can be. The 3-cone drill is always interesting if he does that. To see how quick can a guy be? I think that's gonna be the biggest thing, is can he get his feet showing that he's as quick as he is sturdy and strong. So Broderick Jones, a guy I do think that could be in that consideration. Some people have him as a high first round pick. Some people have him as the first tackle off the board. Some people has him as a second round guy. But he's certainly someone the Steelers definitely should have their eye on for how aggressive he plays and the potential that he's shown in his game.
Yeah, and another thing I've seen some people talk about with him is the versatility and the ability to potentially move inside if that's what the Steelers need to dictate at some point in the future. So he could be a piece that you could move around a little bit as well. Not that you necessarily would want to, I think, but you have the option, and I think that versatility is always important. Chris, the other 2 that I wanted to touch on were Peter Skoronski from Northwestern and Paris Johnson Jr., who you mentioned from Ohio State. I haven't seen a ton of mocks with Skoronski because, again, I think like Witherspoon, a lot of the mocks have him going a little bit higher than where the Steelers are picking. But he's certainly someone that, if he's available, the Steelers will probably be giving a long look to. What do you think of those 2 guys and what they have to prove this week?
I'll start with Skoronski. I think it'll be interesting to measure his wingspan when they do that, because that's been the biggest knock on him. Is people loved him at Northwestern, taking on Big Ten, edge rushers and protecting the way he did there. But people are a little concerned that, yes, he's 6'4", just like Broderick Jones, but at the same time, his arms are said to be shorter. So if he does have shorter arms, that kind of puts you at a disadvantage when you're out there at offensive tackle, where you want guys with longer arms to use the extension to kind of keep guys, edge rushers, from getting into your frame, keep them and force their path to be the widest around. So Peter Skoronski, people are going to be looking at that arm length when they do the measurement, get the official numbers there, and say, okay, how does that compare to the other offensive tackles in the class? Because there's also the talk about, like, Broderick Jones, I honestly think is more of a real offensive tackle. Peter Skoronski, more people are talking about him being the guy that bumps into guard and playing more in the interior where he can protect him. But here's the other concern there, is that Peter Skoronski, there's not a whole lot of tape of him crushing people. Like, he's very sound in technique, and there's examples where you could pick out where, yeah, he crushed this guy, he got this pancake here, but there's other guys in this tackle class that are like the bullies who push you, who maul you, who crush you in the path. And so I think people are going to see, like, how does he do with the bench press? How does he do with the broad jump? Show that you're the kind of guy that when you get going forward, when you get your momentum and everything built up, what kind of force can you generate to move the gigantic people who, if you move to the interior, you're going to need to go up against some of the bigger defensive tackles. That we talk about Jalen Carter being a phenomenal athlete. Peter Skoronski most likely will have to tangle with that kind of guy. How do you go against like a Cam Hayward, for example? So I think that's the biggest thing, is strength and functional strength at the point of attack is where Peter Skoronski is going to be kind of looking at there as well. It was like, now Paris Johnson, I think, is a guy that he's the ultimate prototype of this class. He's 6'6", he's 310, he looks really strong, he looks quick when he puts it together, but I think sometimes is that I think he's still a guy that's still figuring out how to fully play tackle the way that he will need to in the NFL. There's sometimes that, like Broderick Jones, he'll be a little too aggressive with a punch, he'll miss, and that'll allow his opponent to get a easier path to the quarterback in pass protection. He's also a guy that he played guard for a little bit at Ohio State, and he just moved to tackle in his last year. So I think more so Paris Johnson Jr., he just needs to show that he's not lacking. He needs to show that he's in the top, the top 10 of his class in all the athletic measures, so that there's no question like, wait a minute, why is he so far back? Just make sure that he looks really athletic, even top 5 of his class, really just to prove that he's among that group, and that'll maintain his status. But I think Paris Johnson Jr., anyone that's looking at him, as long as he doesn't go to the bottom of this offensive tackle class in any of the measurements and any of the drills and things, I think he'll be fine. It'll just be a matter of, how do we think that you'll take on coaching in the NFL to be the prospect that we think you can be at the 6'6", 310+ pound frame.
Chris, are there any other people you're wanting to watch from a Steelers perspective as we go into the NFL Combine? I think we mentioned kind of the top 6, but there's obviously plenty of other names that the Steelers could be interested in. Lucas Van Ness is probably the biggest one that comes to mind, because that's a guy Ray Fittipaldo has highlighted, and we've seen some movement toward him in the mock drafts. Are there any other players that you're excited to see in the Combine with the potential of them becoming a Steeler?
Well, I mean, Lucas Van Ness, like you said, is interesting because he didn't start at Iowa. He was more of a rotational guy who just measures very well. And if he's explosive, people are waiting to see him, because there's some people that think that if he puts on the combine performance that some project, he could jump ahead of the Steelers. Like someone might take him in the top 15, and then he's not even on the Steelers board, which is crazy to think when you look at all the way that guys lined up this year. But other guys I'm certainly looking at, the cornerback class especially. I really like Julius Brents. He had a great Senior Bowl, a week of the Senior Bowl too, to see how he was a cornerback out of Kansas State, and he's a guy that you wouldn't have to take in the first, second, or even maybe third round. He's a guy that he could hover around into the 4th round there at 120 and be a very reasonable pick there if they haven't gotten their cornerback, the cornerback of their dreams, or even if they had gotten one cornerback, maybe they double up there. Kelly Ringo out of Georgia, he's another guy that I think could be really interesting. There's Jaden Reed out of the wide receiver out of Michigan State. He's a guy who I think could be a really good slot prospect for the way he gets loose, but you want to see how he measures out. He might not have the best 40 just watching the way that he plays, but if he's able to get a good shuttle time, if he's able to show how quick he can change directions and get to his top speed, that would be impressive. And I think the Steelers really could use a slot receiver from this draft class if they were to get one. They don't need to draft one early, I don't think, but look for the guys who don't run the fastest time, but have the quickest change of direction in that department. And same thing goes with cornerbacks there. But yeah, certainly want to see those guys. Offensive linemen, defensive linemen, I think are also Keanu Benton. I thought really impressed as out of Wisconsin, the defensive lineman. I want to see how he looks in this process. And as a guy who covers the Pitt Panthers, I really want to see how Servassier Dennis runs. I don't think he's going to be a guy that creeps above, day 3 picks or anything like that. But he could be a person where if he runs really well At linebacker, everyone knows he's really smart and he knows his things there. If he has like some good testing numbers, he's a guy that could go from, some people are saying 7th round pick, to maybe he's a 4th round pick. Maybe he does creep himself up there. So lots of guys in that department. Brandon Hill, another guy from Pitt, who I think stands to have a really good chance to improve himself. I think Pitt has 6 guys going there. Izzy Abanikanda, everyone wants to see how fast is his 40-yard dash time with how fast he looked in college football. He could boost himself. Not that the Steelers would consider him, but he's another guy that I think everyone will be looking at. Hob Baldonado, Desmond Alexander, those guys. Lots of people to keep your eyes on. And that's the thing. This is a really interesting class for a lot of positions that the Steelers really could use some support in. So certainly a lot of guys. I think Kalijah Kancey, another one. How does he test in a lot of the quickness departments? His big thing is he's 6 feet tall. So how is he going to measure up against some of these guys that are 6'5", 6'6" defensive linemen? Well, he's explosive. If he proves just how much more explosive he can be, one of the better athletes of interior defensive linemen this year, his stock goes through the roof as well. And maybe he goes as high as Mel Kiper projected, with him being a 10th overall pick by the Eagles. That's the highest I've seen Kalijah Kancey go anywhere.
Yeah, it's been very interesting to see how his draft stock has kind of matured, and they'll take a big step with that this week at the Combine. Chris, I did want to touch on some other names that came up in mock drafts this week that we haven't already talked about. The biggest standout to me was Keyshawn Boutte from LSU. The receiver. He started strong. I think he had a 300-yard game against Ole Miss his freshman season, caught 9 touchdowns as a sophomore, but things kind of rolled back statistically in 2022. I think he only had about 500 receiving yards for the whole season. So he's known as having the ability to make a lot of plays, but he hasn't exactly proved the consistency that you'd like to see out of him. Some people have him going as high as the 2nd round. I've seen him picked as low as 91. What's your read on him, and whether the Steelers should be interested in a player like that?
Well, here's the thing with Boutte. I like his potential, and I haven't studied enough of him to say a finite grade on where he is, and we'll see how he does at this Combine. But the things that I noticed, that when you look at his overall body of play, he is insane as a deep threat. Like you say, hey, line up in the slot outside and just go. I think his 40-yard dash time is going to be one that a lot of people watch to see how does he fly when he's on the field. But his problems, some of the problems the Steelers are currently trying to sort through with some of their receivers right now, and that's he drops the football. He doesn't have the best he doesn't have the best hands in this draft class. He also isn't the best at catching the ball away from his body, and that's something that we saw amazing with George Pickens. He's a guy that's going to be more of a body catcher. And I think that also his route running could use some work. So he's a guy that I think the potential is there for him to be a deep threat. But I think that the Steelers, they already have a speed guy in Calvin Austin that they're hoping comes back and can get healthy this year. They already have Deontay Johnson who gets separation. They already have kind of a wide catch radius guy in George Pickens. I'm not so sure Boutte is the fit for the Steelers, especially if you're looking at one of those 2nd-round picks when they have a lot of other prospects to consider.
Speaking of those 2nd-round picks, I've really started to see a trend emerge of defensive linemen, edge rushers, guys in that realm. The Steelers kind of going after guys in that range rather than with their 1st-round pick. The first one that came up this week that I don't think we've talked about, on these videos yet, is Nolan Smith from Georgia. He's classified as an edge rusher, but he's more known for his ability to stuff the run. He only had 3 sacks for Georgia, the defending national champions. So what do you want to see from him maybe at this Combine to justify that a Steelers draft pick? Because we know getting to the pass is so important in this Steelers defense specifically.
Well, here's the thing with Nolan Smith is that, like you said, his pass rushing skills don't look too sharp. He looks like he struggles. But one thing that pops off on tape, as it did with a lot of Georgia guys, man, this guy's big, strong, and explosive. 6'3", 235-ish. This is a guy who, when he locks up with you, he's going to be a problem. And that's why he's so good against the run, is that when it's just mano-a-mano, who's stronger, he wins that battle a lot of time in college. And what you want to see out of him at the Combine is just fulfill that profile. Just be one of the strongest, be one of the quickest, one of the most explosive, and then show that you can be that kind of guy who can be that impactful. And then you can develop pass rush skills. TJ Watt was not a prolific pass rusher for Wisconsin when he came. He had one move. It was push, pull, rip, push, pull, and get past you. But when he got to the Steelers, he developed a rip move. He developed a spin move, a club move. Like, not a club move, but a swim move to get over guys. And now TJ Watt's in a position where he has 3, 4, 5 different moves that he can hit you with at an elite pace that puts you off guard. That's where I think it's going to take time for Nolan Smith. But if he wants to prove himself, just blow up the combine. Show that you are this physically dominant force that is going to be tough on the edge. So that'll be the big thing there. And then the Steelers will happily take a guy who, if you're, this is where if your biggest concern is can he learn this technique when he has all these other prolific guys that can get after the quarterback, like Cam Hayward, like TJ Watt, like Alex Highsmith, guys that have been in the double-digit sacks departments, you take that problem every day of the week. So I like him a lot there, and I think that's going to be the concern with a lot of the guys in this class. Getting the athlete who can fit into the profile, or, do they want to opt for the guy who maybe is more technical than he is athletic? And I think that's going to be a big question. But Nolan Smith, a guy that, I wouldn't take him at 17th overall. I may not even take him at 32, but if he somehow finds a way to 49, that's a guy I'm on board with. Because I do think that, because the other thing is he's an edge guy, right? So he'd be the third edge for the Steelers at this point. Is the third edge the thing that you want to make one of your top 2 picks when you need to address the offensive line? You need to find the future Cam Hayward. You need to find a cornerback for the future. You may need to find an off-ball linebacker to pair with Miles Jack. I just think that that's where Nolan Smith, if he falls, okay, great, happy day. But it's tough for me to say go after that guy with the other things that they got to worry about right now.
Someone who seems to have a few more more developed pass rushing skills is Adia Debawar from Northwestern. He had a huge Senior Bowl to kind of vault himself, in some people's view, into being a top 50 prospect. He can play outside and inside as a pass rusher, which gives a lot of versatility. What do you think about him as a prospect and potential fit on the Steelers defensive line that seems to have so much need?
So I like Adebayor's talent as far as being able to get off the line, create problems, and execute different moves. Like, he's one of those guys that I think that he could be a guy that that uses his quickness to get off the ball, make you miss, and maybe have a few extra pass rush moves to display there. But and I think that he has the great effort and everything. But I do want to see how does he do when he has to do that, but also then mix in run defending downs where he kind of has to set the edge and not get blown up. That's something that I think doesn't come easy to guys like Jason Worlds is a guy I think back to 10 years ago with the Steelers when he was allowed to rush the passer. Awesome, great job. But when he had to defend the run, he could not set the edge, and that was something that they needed Bud Dupree to get Bud Dupree to do in the years after. And now it's not an issue with Alex Highsmith and T.J. Watt. But that's the thing. If I'm getting an edge guy, like if I'm the Steelers, run defense is just as important. So I might tend to get a guy who, like T.J. Watt, was a great run defender in college and a good pass rusher, but not a great pass rusher because of I think he was just limited in how many different moves that he had. And I was there for TJ Watt's first training camp. I remember him going up against Xavier Grimble, and he was using that one move over and over. And Grimble was the third string tight end, not known for blocking that well, and he was handling TJ Watt. And TJ Watt was getting frustrated, like, I should be able to beat this guy. James Harrison pulled him aside. I hear him say 9-0. He pulls him over, and I see him show him the rip move and say, "Hey, work this in. Get that you know that you have that. Use it." And it took time, but then eventually on the next rep, he used the rip move. It was there. And then if you look back to TJ Watt's rookie season, in his first couple games, he had the moves in his repertoire. Then as the season went on, they kind of faded away because they weren't something that he had ingrained into his mind. But by his second year, they were ingrained, and he was an elite pass rusher at all times. And that's why he's TJ Watt today. So I like Adebayor. I think that he has Adebayor. I think he has a really good potential, but I would tend to get a guy more like Nolan Smith who maybe needs to refine more of those pass rush moves. But there's no question that this guy is explosive, strong, physical. He'll handle the run, and then eventually you'll get the pass rush moves in there to develop and trust that your guys can do that.
The last defensive lineman this is the second week in a row that we've talked about him. I talked with Ray Fittipaldo last week on this video about him is Siaki Ika from Baylor. Who profiles is really a run stuffing nose tackle type. He's a big guy. He's athletic for his size. I think he's like 350, something pretty big. And so he's very athletic for that weight, but he's not going to be, an explosive pass rusher or anything like that. You think about the way the Steelers have struggled against the run over the last handful of years, and you kind of say, oh, wouldn't it have been great if they had a Casey Hampton type in there, to kind of plug up those running lanes. But with how many needs the Steelers have, is Ika a guy you want to see them investing a premium pick in, or is that more of a luxury item at this point?
So I like Ika as an overall player. And it's tough because nose tackle is just such a limited position in today's NFL where you become kind of a two-down guy. And I think it's important to note the Steelers went from the dead last in run defense to top 10 in run defense this year with Larry Ogunjobi. So I like Ika as a player and as a guy who could grow. But, one thing that I want to see out of big guys is not just can you be big, can you dominate the center if we line you up there, but when other teams double team you, do you hold up that double team and not give up ground and keep your linebacker clean? And that's something I didn't see enough of Ika. And he could be that guy. Again, none of these guys are who they're eventually going to be in the NFL. Everyone has room to grow, but I think that's something that he needs to show on the field when he's out there, to show like, hey, I'm backing up my 6'4", 350 plus frame there as a player. And I think it's kind of funny. I think he's like the opposite of Kalijah Kancey, and how Kalijah Kancey's smaller but quicker and can get after guys. Ika's more of the big guy that eats up space and can kind of dominate in the run game, like you said. But again, if I'm getting a guy like that, they don't just need to dominate one guy; they need to control two guys, and that's where I'm not so sure if Ika is the move at even 49, the Steelers' second round pick of this draft class, unless But again, everything depends on who falls where and how, everything goes down. The Steelers, I think they want to get interior defensive linemen. And who knows? One thing I think that's known about Ika is that his athleticism is very good for his size. It's just, when you compare it to the Kalijah Kanceys and to the Jalen Carters and the other guys that are top of the class, it's lacking there. It's just surprising for how big he is, how well he moves. If the Steelers think they can develop that, go get him. But I think that at that spot, there's going to be a lot of different players at a lot of different positions that are really good at their positions that might not take as much of not a philosophical change, but a change, like, trying to adapt them to what you want them to be there. So Ika's a very interesting pick there in the second round, but there's a lot of guys in the second round that I would have my eyes on if I'm the Steelers, that I think personally, just watching the tape that I have, that I would take over him.
Yeah, it's a premium pick. You got to get it right, and that's kind of why it feels like, yeah, you'd love to have that guy on your defense, I think, but do you want to invest what it would take to get him? I'm not persuaded myself that we're there yet. Chris, before we sign off, one other person I wanted to ask you about, Daniel Jeremiah. I think he's one of the most respected mock draft guys out there. He's on NFL.com. You can check out his full mock draft that we'll link to at postgazette.com. But he had what I thought was a pretty controversial pick, which was Darnell Wright from Tennessee at number 17 to the Steelers. Pretty much everywhere else I've looked this week, in past weeks, has Wright really as more of a fringe first-round pick, more of a second-round guy. He's very polished as a pass rush defender. I don't think he allowed a single sack this past season for Tennessee, which is, stands out in a league like the SEC. But he's not quite as strong in the running, in paving the way for the running game. What do you think of him at 17? Does he belong in that group with those three guys we mentioned at the top of the video in terms of offensive tackles the Steelers should be looking at number 17?
I think that Darnell Wright has a lot of potential in, he has power in his game. But I think that he has the upper body strength. I think he needs to improve, and this is where he could show, a bit of quickness in some of the drills in the draft. But he needs to be able to show that the feet can follow the upper body, because when he locks onto guys, and I think that's the biggest thing about his pass protecting ability, is that if he gets his hands on you, you in trouble because he's he's a big dude at 6'6", 335. He has that prototypical offensive tackle build. And I think that Daniel Jeremiah is kind of projecting there like, hey, like if this guy does everything right in the draft process, he wins at the combine, interviews well, he could creep himself up into those conversations. And I think Darnell Wright would be a very good pick if he was there in the second round for the Steelers. I'm just not so sure at the 17th overall pick how he would measure up against some of the other key playmakers are there. If one of the if Paris Johnson falls that far, how how do I measure those guys up? Whereas Darnell Wright has more experience in offensive tackle. I think that Paris Johnson has more of the mean streak that you could want there. But in Darnell Wright, I think he needs to kind of learn how to when he wants to exhibit his strength, how to do that without giving too much and then losing his position. So that's just me on Darnell Wright. I think that he's I haven't put him at 17. Like I saw that mock draft and I was like, whoa, that's pretty high. But if he works his way up there, that would be the story that he earned his way into that position. I just think right now he hasn't been in that conversation just from what he's put together at Tennessee. Granted, again, he has experience. He's played around. He's been able to be a really experienced guy for Tennessee. And again, he's a powerful player, but I think he still has more to grow in to be, the run blocker that you want on top of being the pass protector that you want offensive tackle. Because I think that's the other thing. Don't forget, the Steelers aren't just getting Kenny Pickett protectors. They're getting maulers. I'm pretty sure they want guys that can go and bulldoze the path for Najee Harris so they can show like, hey, yeah, like you can still win with good running backs in the NFL. And I think that, the Chiefs showed that if you have the offensive line and you can run the ball on somebody, you don't have to put as much pressure on a quarterback, especially when he's injured like Patrick Mahomes was. I think that if Wright can show that he can be that profile, he'll be a pick, that works his way up the board. I'm just not so sure that 17th is where he gets to. But again, long draft process. We'll see how he does one at the combine, and then if the Steelers have a heavy presence at his pro day.
Yeah, that'll be interesting to see. Chris, any final thoughts as we look toward the combine here?
Just that I think the biggest thing to remember here is that, and I said this before, but when we're looking at the combine, we're confirmed, even myself, like I'm a football junkie. I watch a lot of this tape and just like, okay, cool. I'm confirming my thoughts there. The thoughts that are being confirmed by the front office are on another level because that's their only job. This is what they do. That's what they do for a living. If you're the average fan and you're getting caught off, I think that's normal. But understand that most NFL front offices, they're waiting to see like, okay, we have this guy pegged here. Is he who we thought he was? Okay, cool. Then we interview him. Then we move on from there. And I think that'll be the biggest thing is that when we start to talk to guys coming out of the combine, who did they talk to? Who are they most impressed with? And then who do we learn? Where's the NFL teams most impressed with as far as interviews? Those are the things that I think that people should pay attention to that often kind of get drowned out in the background when it comes to 40-yard dash times and this explosive over here, this throw that we saw. All those things kind of pale in comparison, but relationships and who builds them at the combine, that's one of the bigger stories to keep following too.
Absolutely. And, I'm excited for next week, Chris, when we'll be back and we'll be talking about, having some results to chew on whether these guys measured up. It's always fun to see how these mock drafts change. That's why we do them, through the whole process. That's why we start, in February, we end in April, because that gives you the ability to see who rises, who falls, and really kind of hone in on what guys you think the Steelers, should be wanting. So I'm excited to see how this shuffles the deck a little bit. Maybe we see some different names we haven't been seeing the last handful of weeks. And Chris, I'm excited to talk to you about it because you do watch the tape. You're not just guessing. What these guys can and can't do. So thanks for joining me, and I'm looking forward to when we have you on next time.
Absolutely.
If you're just joining us for the first time and you liked this video, please pop a like to help us out with the YouTube algorithm. Please also subscribe to the channel where you can primarily see Christopher Carter on the North Shore Drive Monday, Wednesday, Friday. Chris, do you have anything interesting coming up next week you want to tease?
Just the fact that I will be down at the combine with our guys Jerry Dulac and Ray Fittipaldo, so we'll be there live on hand. I've got my travel set here that I'm actually still putting together for how we're going to record down there. So at Indianapolis, we'll be there on hand. We'll be talking to the players as they go through the draft process. It's going to be a fun one. So all week long, we'll be at the combine. If you want that exclusive coverage, get it here at the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette.
And please hit that subscription deal down in the description. $6 for 6 months of access to postgazette.com. Obviously, you'll get all the YouTube content here on YouTube, but we're also going to be writing a lot about the combine. If all three of those guys are there, there's going to be a lot of content. So you're going to want to check that out. That'll get you all the way up to the draft. It'll get you into baseball season. So check out that deal. And we'll look forward to talking to you again next week.
Thank you for checking out this content from Post-Gazette Sports. If you liked the video, please like it and subscribe to our YouTube channel. If you enjoyed it on Apple Podcasts, please rate us 5 stars on Apple Podcasts. For 6 months of digital access to post-gazette.com for just $6, click the link down in the description.